Hello, everybody, and hello again to some of you. So, my name's Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm classically a futurist. So, I explore the future and the deep future. So, what technologies and what trends and the impacts, basically, that those technologies and trends that are emerging are going to actually have on global business, culture, and society, like yourselves. And in this particular presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to be having a look at some of the emerging technologies that are actually already having quite a disruptive effect, basically, on what businesses do, but also how they think about not just today, but also in the future. And then from a leadership perspective, we're going to be having a look at how you actually become a, should we say, dare we say, future-ready leader. Now, so my agenda is this. What we're going to be having a look at is we're going to be having a look at what I call future foundations, because these foundational sort of technologies, these foundational levers basically are increasingly driving change. They're driving disruption, and they're driving everything faster and faster. We're going to have a look at max change. We're going to have a look at the science fact future, not the sci-fi future. We're going to be looking at how we prepare for the future, and then I'm going to give a summary at the end. Now, all of the things that I'm going to be talking through and talking about are available in these codexes, which you guys actually generally already have. So if you scan the QR code, then you'll be able to download all of these different books and things on the future technologies, future trends, and future thinking. Now, when we have a look at max change, what do I mean by max change? We're used to a world that is continually changing beneath our feet today. However, over in California, we are seeing the rise of this new term. We're all generally familiar with the term VUCA, as the Americans say, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and an ambiguous world. But increasingly, we have this kind of MAX acronym coming along on the back of it. Now, when we talk about VUCA Max, what we're really doing is we're saying that a lot of the changes that we're seeing today are massive. Now, what we mean by that is that they are global in nature, and they are generally what we call system level. So they are changes that are changing everything. Everything is also accelerating. If we were having this chat 10 years ago, the technologies and the things that we were going to be talking about would be very, very different to today. So I think you all grasp that today is moving faster than it did yesterday, and that tomorrow, as we head into 2030, things are going to be moving faster still. And then things are also exponential. Now, even exponential technologies are changing, where, for example, we're used to using the term exponential to describe something that is changing very, very rapidly, a kind of doubling of pace. However, when we have a look at Moore's law, we're used to computer chips doubling in terms of their cost performance every 18 months. When we have a look at artificial intelligence, the power and capability of artificial intelligence today isn't doubling every 18 months, every year. Arguably, basically, it's quintupling every couple of months. So even exponential change is changing. Now, when we have a look at some of the global mega trends, increasingly we have huge economic shifts. We've got a multipolar world ahead of us. A lot of organizations talk about America and China. However, I always encourage them to remember the BRICS. So when we have a look at the growth of the BRICS as an economic bloc, it represents 40% of all the people on the planet, including India, obviously, and 40% of global GDP. So when we have a look at economic change, the blocks are changing. What we buy is changing. How we buy it is changing. The currencies that we buy things with are changing. How we think about businesses and how we scale business is changing. When we have a look at environmental trends, obviously we're talking about things like sustainability, net zero, climate change, and so on and so forth. Those are global changes. When we have a look at the political change, we are in a huge area now where political change is, should we say, difficult to understand. It's difficult to predict. We're seeing the rise of trade wars, corporate blacklisting. We're seeing the rise of new power struggles and so on and so forth. We're seeing a splitting, a cultural, political and economic and technological splitting of the world across typically cultural lines. And then when we have a look at society, the way that society behaves is changing faster than ever before as well, in terms of new consumption patterns, new customer behaviors. And these are all of the things that your clients are grappling with on a day-out basis. Now, when we have a look at the sheer speed of change, at Accenture, you are talking more in terms of a post-digital world. But when we have a look at the speed of change, we're used to the speed of change being digital. Now, what I mean by this is, for example, we can have a major technology platform release something today, and by the end of the day, if they executed correctly, they could have billions of people using that new product or service or behaving in new ways by the end of the day. So the speed of change is digital. But while we know this already, we have another factor that is accelerating the pace of change, and that's artificial intelligence. So we're no longer just changing at the speed of digital. We are changing at the speed of artificial intelligence. And the two are really quite different, even though they are connected. And I'll give you some examples. So, for example, we are seeing the rise of artificial intelligences, generative artificial intelligences, that are making products faster, developing products faster. So, for example, on this particular slide here, what you see is a rocket engine, a new revolutionary 3D printable rocket engine that was designed by an artificial intelligence in a day. We are seeing AIs that can create new vaccines and new proteins in minutes. As we are seeing in the fashion space, companies like Under Armour that are using artificial intelligence to develop sneakers 98% faster than they could traditionally. And then we're also seeing artificial intelligence accelerate the rate of software development and many, many other things. Toyota, for example, in Japan, since you're talking about Japan, Toyota have been using generative artificial intelligence to design new lithium-ion batteries for their electric vehicles in 2 weeks. That used to take 2 years. So when we talk about the pace of change, we're not just changing at the rate of digital, we're changing at the rate of artificial intelligence as well, from a software perspective and a hardware perspective. Now, as we look a little bit sort of further into the future, we're also seeing artificial intelligences building their own businesses. So this was an experiment out of the United States. And if we take platforms like ChatGPT and we create lots of artificially intelligent agents, we kind of used to call them bots, now they're getting renamed as agents. These agents were able to collaborate with one another to create and launch a software company. But they did it with $1 and they did it in 7 minutes. So this is kind of the world that we're heading into, basically, where artificial intelligence takes a much more sort of central role in not just product development, but also building, scaling, and operating businesses. And then we also had this example. Again, from the United States, we had a single individual called Mr. Mankind who used artificial intelligence to help him ideate a new business, develop a business, and launch a business. And in this case, he launched a meme coin. And 2 weeks after launch, that meme coin, which is called Turbo Toad, had a value on the Binance decentralized exchange in the United States of $250 million. Even today, months on, it has a value over $50 million. So we live already in a world that doesn't operate by the rules of the past, where things are changing faster and faster and faster, where things that we thought were impossible are increasingly becoming the status quo. And these are the things that increasingly your clients are getting visibility of and asking you about, and asking you to explain what this means for their business, their markets, their outlook, their visions, their strategies, and so on and so forth. And then while we talk about artificial intelligence, this is my 2024 Griffin annual emerging technology starburst, and I'm not going to go through this, but it's in the codex as I alluded to earlier. There are over 600 exponential emerging technologies. AI is just one dot on this chart. The technologies on this chart, when you combine them together, they are your next generation product or service, and the one after that, and the one after that. Because if we're developing new products and services, it's a combination of technologies, not just about a single technology. So as we sort of go around that wheel, and again, this all accelerates the rate of change, but also the depth and breadth of change. Now, when you go and have conversations with any clients of yours in any sector, every industry is changing and every industry is converging. Being a native digital business simply gets you to the start line now. And once you're a digital business, you can explore and move into new adjacent industries and complementary markets faster and easier than ever before. So we're seeing massive changes in the agricultural space with AgTech 2, AgTech 3, where we have vertical farms and cellular meats that decentralize farming and disrupt farming in ways that many people didn't think possible 10 years ago. In the Middle East, we are using new construction techniques to 3D print 11-story skyscrapers. When we have a look at the energy sector, we're at the start of a $92 trillion shift. And recently I gave a keynote at COP28. This shift is accelerating. When we have a look at the financial services markets that you operate in, we have Bank 4.0. We have fintechs who are trying to disrupt Bank 4.0. And then we have decentralized finance organizations that increasingly mean anyone can become a bank or a financial services provider. Companies like Roblox, for example, with 200 to 300 million users, could hop onto the decentralized finance bandwagon to offer all manner of financial services to their huge, idealistic client base. And then when we have a look at healthcare, we have artificial intelligence revolutionizing healthcare and drug discovery and vaccine discovery. We have predictive healthcare. We have in vivo gene editing. We have human digital twins. We have ways to accelerate human clinical trials using artificial intelligence like we've never seen before. So healthcare is going through a major shift. But now when we actually have a look at the science fact future, again, more of your clients are doing things that 10 years ago you'd never thought that they would. Coca-Cola have a metaverse Coca-Cola that you can drink virtually, both in the virtual world, but then actually drink for real in the real world. When we have a look at companies like Adidas and Nike and Under Armour, as well as others in the retail space, they're increasingly 3D printing fashion and the back of the store. This eliminates the need for Adidas, for example, to have a global supply chain. So in technical terms, we call this flattening the supply chain quite drastically. That changes how you talk to a customer about their future, the future of manufacturing and so on and so forth. Then we have health insurance organizations that are increasingly using artificial intelligence, machine vision, and different sensors, aka kind of wearable devices, to predict that you are going to have a heart attack so they can send the ambulance out before you have the heart attack. so that they don't have to pay out as much on the back end. So when we have a look at the insurance industry, the ability to predict risk is now starting to become the major business model. When we have a look at Toyota, but also companies like Audi, they are increasingly talking about the post-car world. Because if you have a vehicle that has no steering wheel, that has no dashboard, that has no pedals, is it a car or is it an autonomous pod? So companies like Toyota and Audi are realizing that we already stand on the precipice of the death of the car, which means they need to change their business model, how they think about developing new products and services, how they think about their new customers, their new markets that they could move into. For example, they can sell mobile meeting room as a service. When we have a look at organizations like KFC and companies like those in Singapore, we have a post-chicken future because we are growing chicken nuggets in a lab and then selling them in the streets of Singapore without the chicken. We no longer need to raise animals to produce meat. And then when we have a look at cyber, we see these examples. How many of your clients basically have seen this, whether it's with ransomware or other things? Hackers stole my crypto. And in some cases, some hackers now, as we see with Kraken, are actually demanding control of entire companies, because if they don't get entire control of companies from a legal perspective, they're not going to release the virtual assets back to the companies. However, when we have a look at, shall we say, thinking, when we try to think of cyber attribution, did you know that the lawyers have actually found a way to find anonymous crypto hackers, scammers, and so on and so forth, and then airdrop NFTs onto those scammers' decentralized exchange crypto wallets? That's not easy to say. And put an injunction on them. So lawyers, because lawyers are actually innovating, we now have a way to make anonymous hackers accountable and actually get our assets back. And in the examples where we've seen airdropped NFTs, the hackers haven't been able to withdraw their funds from their wallets and have actually given companies their money back. So change comes from unexpected places. Now, when we have a look at AI, just as a bit of a dive, AI basically itself is a whole massive area. Today, when we have a look at these large language models like ChatGPT, did you know that ChatGPT has a verbal IQ of 155? It understands human language better than 99% of humans do. It has 1,000 times more general knowledge in its synthetic brain than any human, and it learns 300 million times faster than any human. And it does all of this with just 1% of the connections of the human brain, which means it is a fundamentally superior learning algorithm to the human brain, in the words of Geoffrey Hinton. Now, consider this. We sort of try to look at a future basically of intelligent machines. The artificial intelligences that you're deploying at Accenture used to parse huge volumes of structured and or unstructured data to identify patterns that would then be thrown into, say, spreadsheets, pretty visualizations, and so on and so forth. So we used to mine data for patterns and sentiment. However, because AI is now so good at understanding human language, as we've seen with companies like DeepMind and Google, AI is now able to create and has created its own knowledge from the things that it's read. Now, if a system can get knowledge from things that it is exposed to, things that it's read, for example, at what point does artificial intelligence turn that knowledge, which is something that we do as humans quite well, into wisdom? And if an artificial intelligence can take knowledge and turn it into wisdom, then at what point do they say, well, based on this wisdom that I have, I'm going to do this action? So when we talk about sentience, AI will never be sentience in the way that we think of it, but it could be synthetically sentient, just as a little bit of fun. But artificial intelligence is so much more than a lot of us actually realize today. Algorithms are already evolving themselves. AIs are creating new AIs, again, courtesy of companies like Google. Courtesy of companies like DeepMind and OpenAI, a lot of these algorithms and artificial intelligences are capable of self-improvement. But they also increasingly do what they do in an unexplainable way. So while we talk about artificial intelligence being a black box when it comes to decision making, increasingly it's unexplainable. But even if we had explainable AI today, we've already seen artificial intelligences changing the languages that they talk to one another in. They make up their own languages. We've seen them encrypting it. We've seen this with DALL-E. We've seen this with Meta and Facebook's artificial intelligences. We've even seen this with OpenAI's intelligences. So increasingly, artificial intelligence is genuinely unexplainable. And it's also a problem solver. So when we have a look at open-ended artificial intelligence, we have more and more AIs like those from Uber. And Uber's AI is called Poet, that is able to create a problem and then try to solve it. So AI is a very, very deep bag of stuff that increasingly means that we are starting to move from the point of inventing artificial intelligence to discovering what it can actually do. And a lot of the things that we discover that it can do are surprising to us. So we're almost in a post-invention artificial intelligence world. Now, from a data perspective, it's estimated that AI could run out of publicly available data to be trained on by as early as 2026. So consider this. The vast majority of foundational artificial intelligence models that you are all using today in different ways has been trained on all of the information on the internet. A lot of the artificial intelligence companies now are trying to find new sources of data, hoard data, and generate data. So we're seeing companies like OpenAI developing public-private partnerships where private organizations, perhaps like yourselves, actually give them access to private data sets so that these AIs can learn about human behaviors and human relationships even more than they do today, but then so that these AIs can become even more specialist in specific domains and specific interests. We see the rise of synthetic data, which is something I was talking about 10 years ago, and so on and so forth. So AI in 2026 could face its very own D-Day. But when we have a look at what Sam Altman is trying to do, along with Microsoft, they're trying to create the first artificial general intelligences, where the definition is quite fluid and flexible depending on the company. And these AGIs, it's estimated, will have an IQ of 1600. They will have 1 billion times more general knowledge in their synthetic brains than any human. They will learn at a speed that's unknown. And this is 2028 onwards. And we've already seen the development of sub-AGI artificial intelligences. And in the words of Sam Altman, an AGI is an artificial intelligence that outperforms humans at all economically valuable work. So consider this. Economically valuable work that humans do today really account for the vast majority of our global services industries. Programming, coding, financial services, advisory, consultancy, all that kind of stuff, and a lot more, obviously. So by 2030, we could start seeing the emergence of artificial intelligences that erode humans' position in the, shall we say, services industries. We also see the rise of artificial intelligence as an operating system. So this is where we simply engage with agents. We don't engage with apps on a smartphone. We simply talk to an agent, and these are called interactive artificial intelligences now. That AI simply understands what you want it to do and what you want it to accomplish, and then it goes off and finds the other agents, the other AI agents that can fulfill that request. So think of all the apps that you have on your smartphone today. They all do specific things. Now tie all of that together under interactive artificial intelligence, which is generally seen as being the next phase of generative AI. And all of a sudden, you have a completely new way to interface with technology, use technology, and so on and so forth. We can see skills on demand with artificial intelligence. A lot of it's made about automating humans with AI. But if you aren't a lawyer, as we automate law and contract development, all of you increasingly have access to the skill that lawyers have. And so now you just simply ask an artificial intelligence to draft you a contract, and so on and so forth. So this is where, as we automate individual jobs, tasks, and skills, and put an interface over the top of those, you now all increasingly have access to skills that you might not have had before. Like, for example, programming or coding or consulting or whatever it happened to be. In addition to that, with organizations like Pepsi and so on and so forth, we are now starting to use artificial intelligence to upskill teams faster. So this is where we take someone who is unskilled at a particular task or job. Maybe they're an apprentice, they've just come into the business. And we can upskill them 50 to 60% faster than before using AI. But we can also learn faster. Bearing in mind that these AIs have 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human, you can ask them almost anything, and you can ask them to teach you about the art of sales, the art of negotiation, master services agreements, and so on and so forth. So I've already demonstrated with 8-year-olds in the United Kingdom that we can accelerate individual learning by 12-fold using AI. And then as we head into the future, increasingly we're seeing CEOs of Fortune 50 companies turning themselves into digital clones, where you now are able to ask those digital clones, in this situation, based on your experience and expertise as the CEO of a Fortune 50 company, what do you think I should do? And then we see the complete automation of content. Pixels and sound, this is synthetic content, synthetic media, and so on and so forth. Artificial intelligence is eating away at content creation, but it's doing it in pockets. We can automate the creation of music or podcasts or the human voice or images or video to a degree. As we head into the future, AI will be producing a whole raft of content that we've never seen before, including reports and documents that even your own artificial intelligences might then start ingesting, which could, if you're not careful, start bringing about something that we call artificial intelligence model collapse, which then means that your AIs that you depend on get dumber over time, not smarter. It's a conversation in itself. And then when we have a look at cyber, my ability as an individual to create malware is so much easier now than ever before. We see the cost of building and launching malware dropping to zero because I can use platforms like Dark GPT to create new forms of malware for me. And then eventually we see artificial intelligence going either semi-auto or full auto and being able to hack systems exponentially faster than they do today. When we have a look at cyber, last year it's estimated that hacking attempts affected over $7 trillion of global GDP. Cyber is only just starting to go exponential. We haven't seen anything yet. And then algo companies. As Accenture, we talked about digital transformation. Then we kind of started talking about the world post-digital. But how many artificial intelligence transformation projects are you now working on? So increasingly, we're going to start moving away from digital transformation programs to maybe intelligence transformation programs. This is already what your organizations and your clients are thinking about as we increasingly create algorithmic companies. So, how do we prepare for not just the future, but for the things that we're seeing emerging today? So, a little segue. 45% of what happens to a company, any company now, is directly influenced by the CEO. 55% of what happens to your clients' businesses happens from external trends, technologies, and sources. So the CEOs that you're talking to are no longer the majority shareholders, shall we say, when it comes to how their businesses prosper in the future. That's a scary place. The average CEO tenure is now 5 years. It's fallen 20% over the past 5 years. And this is based on surveys, basically of the Fortune 250 and a lot of the publicly listed organizations. CEOs are just simply finding it harder to navigate all of these changes, all of these things that they need to know, but actually in some cases can't even see and can't therefore get a point of view on. And in a recent PwC survey, 40% of CEOs that they surveyed of large multinational organizations didn't believe that their companies would be economically viable in 10 years' time. Now, if I told you I didn't think that my business was going to be economically viable in 10 years' time, that's another word of saying going bust. And a lot of this change is simply coming from changing customer behaviors, new regulations. This is a lot of the things that the C-suite are worrying about today. Skills shortages and technology-led disruption. Bearing in mind that we've talked about AI really here. But there are hundreds of other emerging technologies that I could talk to you about, all of which are consuming more and more of the leadership's time. Now, from a future basics perspective, from yourselves' perspective, did you know that today's skills, so services skills, cognitive skills, have a half-life of 5 years? So the skills that you have today that might have lasted you 10, 20, 30, 40 years, decades ago, now will only really help you prosper, shall we say, for the next 5 years. So the skills half-life is now 5 years. We need switchable hard skills as we start seeing artificial intelligence taking more of the heavy lifting, the heavy cognitive lifting, for example, let alone the other things that we could talk about. You need switchable hard skills. So you need solid soft skills though. So that's empathy, that's collaboration. It's not just collaboration with other people, it's collaboration with machines increasingly. And as the future itself accelerates, as the pace of disruption and change accelerates, increasingly as both individuals and as an organization, you need to be able to adapt and learn at extreme speed. This is a challenge. Creating highly flexible, highly adaptable, anti-fragile organizations that are then staffed by individuals who can learn and also adapt at speed is one of the hardest things I think that any organization can do today. It requires cultural change and structural change, as well as operational change, and so on and so forth. The other thing that you can do when it comes to the future is expand your horizons. Now, here's a fun little QR code. Now, if you click this QR code, it will take you to a leadership event that I did with Accenture in 2018. Now, being able to see what is actually coming in the future is increasingly important because the future's coming at us faster. So the principle of foresight is to extend your range of vision further out. to Horizons 2, Horizons 3 in McKinsey speak, so that we can see what the future might look like. We can then debate whether or not we care. We can get a point of view, and then if we do like what that future might look like, then we can develop the strategies and the visions today to make sure that we are prepared for tomorrow. And in this 2018 brief, I talked about a particular technology that wouldn't really appear for about another 2 to 3 years, known as generative artificial intelligence. So by lengthening the road, by lengthening your vision and how far you can see into the future, that helps you prepare and think about the future today. Now, from a leadership mindset, I might be a futurist, but I actually work with the vast majority of Fortune 100 CEOs, boards, and C-suites. So my average client sort of spread is I work with organizations with revenues of $30 billion to, in some cases, a couple of $1 trillion. And so while I'm a futurist, I sit down with the vast majority of leaders in a lot of your clients. And this is what I think a future-ready leader looks like. But it's not one thing, it's many things. So firstly, let's talk about the performance mindset. Think, feel, act. How you think about the world around you influences how you feel about the world around you, which then influences how you act about the world around you. So if you think that the world around you is complex and confusing and you feel that you don't like that, then you can act as an introvert and kind of hide and shy away from it, and a little bit like the ostrich analogy, pretend that the future's not happening. However, when we have a look at the top performing boards, what we actually see is they have the achieve versus avoid mindset. So as individuals, as well as a business, if you look at what you want to achieve, you want to be number one in the marketplace. You want to achieve the goal of onboarding a new client versus the things you want to avoid. You want to avoid redundancies. You want to avoid failing to hit your sales quotas and so on and so forth. What we find that the people who have an achiever's mindset are much more likely to try to figure out how they achieve that goal. It's a strategic thinking. I want that, how do I get it? Whereas versus avoid, I want to avoid not hitting my sales quota. If you have an avoiding mindset, it's tactical. So this is just sort of an important point. Now, from an individual mindset, you need to get comfortable as future leaders with ambiguity, because the future is ambiguous. Today is ambiguous. You don't have all the data that you need to make the decisions that you need or want to make today. You have to be comfortable with change, because if you're uncomfortable with change, the only bad news I have is that you're going to be very uncomfortable and even more uncomfortable as we head into the future. You also have to remember that any threat to you as an individual or to you as an organization is actually an opportunity. If something is a threat to Accenture, it's actually an opportunity for you to embrace it and take the threat to your competitors. Turn it into your advantage. As a leader, it's okay to be fragile. A lot of the CEOs that I talk to just don't feel that they're able to talk to their teams about their mental health and the fact that they don't necessarily have all of the answers. So make sure you've got the right support network around you, and it's okay to be fragile. Look after your mental health. Recognize your value, and also realize that as a leader, you're not always going to be right, but it is important that you make a decision. Now, from an emotional mindset, we can kind of call this EQ, if you like. I feel it's important that as leaders, basically, we are humble. But we're above no one. And the reason for this is everybody is valuable. Everybody's opinion is valuable, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. You need, as a leader, to build emotional resilience, because the future is going to come at you harder and faster than ever before. We're going to see markets and market valuations being destroyed faster than ever before. We're going to see the rise of new competitors coming out of nowhere faster than ever before. The future is generally quite scary to about 75% of people because we can't really see it. And if we can't see it, we don't understand it. And if we don't understand it, we can't have a plan. And if we don't have a plan, then we're worried. You also need to realize that as individuals, you might think you react to things, but you don't. If I started having a go at you, if I started annoying you, you might think you're reacting, but you have to realize you have the choice to respond. So reacting is your subconscious coming out. Responding is your conscious side coming out. So if something is worrying you, troubling you, if something's annoying you, whatever it happens to be, remember, don't react to it. Don't suddenly go back at someone. Think and respond. This is the human skill. And then, as Nelson Mandela did, as a leader, it's important that you listen to everyone first and that you respond last. Nelson Mandela was an expert in this field, and it's actually one of the main reasons why a lot of people think that he was such a significant change maker, basically not just on the local stage in South Africa, but on the international stage as well. Good leaders listen first, respond last. And also, as a leader, if you actually tell people what you think at the start of a meeting, guess what? All of your subordinates, all of your team will say, that's a great idea. So by listening first, you actually let people tell you what they really think, and you hear what they really think without your influence. From a futures mindset, again, you've got to be comfortable with change. You've also got to be open-minded, because many of the things that I've been showing Accenture over the past 7 or 8 years that I've been working with you, they look crazy. They look science fiction-like. You have to be open-minded about the future, because I can show you things that we are doing today that you would have just thought as plain bonkers, science fiction, insane, impossible. Embrace systems thinking. So what we mean by embracing systems thinking is, as leaders and as individuals, connect the dots. Because what happens over here can influence what happens over here. If we have a look, for example, at Airbnb, an example of systems thinking, there's a reason basically why organizations like Hilton would never have innovated anything like Airbnb. You've got to embrace uncertainty, because everything is becoming more uncertain as we go into the future. You've got to think longer term, not just long term, because the future is coming at us faster. All of the most successful companies on the planet today have serious long-term visions that are 5, 10, even 20, even 50 years ahead. And you need to unlearn everything, because the way that we do business today and the way that businesses behave today and the rules of business today have changed. The way that we used to do business, grow, scale, and ideate and everything else is completely changing. So unlearn everything. Now, from a hiring mindset, I ran global sales teams at IBM, at Atos, at companies like EMC. Hire people that are better and smarter than you, because then you learn more. As a leader, constant and continuous learning is your superpower. And then from a leadership mindset itself, be empathetic with people. Don't be arrogant. Lead by example. Always seek out the truth. And this might not sound too strange, but is the problem that someone's coming to you the real problem that they are worried about or that you should be concerned about? And then simplify that problem. One of your superpowers as a leader should be being able to take all of these complex problems and issues and simplifying them into, this is the real problem. This is the real problem that we need to solve. And this is why. And then from a time mindset, I advise you to be more billionaire. People who are older in the room get this. Time is your most precious commodity as an individual and as a business. As you get older, time feels like it's compressing. And it's time that is going to be your greatest worry and your greatest challenge as you start getting older. You realize you just don't have enough time to do everything that you actually want to do. You also need to just learn how to get stuff done. And then when we talk about time compressing, we mean that in a couple of ways. So as you get older, inevitably you find that time is going faster and faster and faster, and that you think that you're running out of runway to do the things that you want to do and enact the changes that you want to enact. But also when we talk about time compressing, if the rate of change is accelerating today, which we know that it is, then you and your clients will have a 5-year or a 10-year plan. But if the rate of change is accelerating, is that 10-year plan not a 5-year plan? Because as humans, we typically think linearly, not exponentially. So time is compressing because the amount of things that we are cramming into a small space of time now is so much greater than it used to be. And then finally, in summary, I always think you should ultimately kind of have this as your mental North Star. Expand your horizons, expand your ecosystems, expand the communities that you work with and the people that you work with and engage with. Explore new things, not just in your own industry, but other industries, not just in the area that you're interested in, but the adjacent areas. And then experiment. Artificial intelligence is a great example of experimenting with it. As we see the future starting to unfurl, we expand our thinking, we explore the future, but it's only really when you get your hands dirty and start experimenting with some of these new technologies, these new trends, these new things, that you understand what they're good for, what they're not good for, whether you should be afraid of them or not. It's only when you experiment that you really understand the nature of the animal. And that's it from me. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it gave you a lot to literally think about.